Well, thank you very much for having me on your show to speak about my experience that I had. Um, I call my presentation, It's All About the Love, which is really what it's all about in terms of all of us being here. It's all about the love. But this year marks 40 years ago that my brother, Don, made his transition from his earthly life. And so I had some experiences in 1983 in relation to his passing. But I have to say up front that um, for many years, I did not share any of the things that I'm talking about here in my presentation because I didn't want people to think that I was crazy or delusional or whatever in relation to my brother's death. When I retired 2016, I decided, you know what, I don't care what people think at this age, and I need to share all of this information that has come through my experience with my brother, mainly to help other people who have lost loved ones tragically, suddenly, uh, to help them potentially through the process. So, as I said, this happened in 1983, which has now been 40 years ago. And as I said, it was 2017 before I actually wrote my book about all of this. But my journey, it really begins when I was 29 years old. And I began having this recurring dream that stayed with me until the fall of 1983. And this dream was always the same. I was outside these wide, expansive fields. There were large crowds of people gathering there. And someone near me asked what was happening. And I replied that I heard it was the end of the world. And everyone at that point was looking up in the sky, and there appeared Jesus. And in that moment, in this dream, when that happened, I just doubled over, almost falling down to the ground. I was experiencing the worst pain of my life, but it wasn't physical pain. It was heartfelt suffering and agony beyond words. And as I doubled over, this dream was, as I doubled over, I just kept saying in this dream, but it isn't supposed to be this way. I thought that the end of the world was supposed to be joyous, and then this dream would end. And then, of course, I was usually startled awake by that. And I had absolutely no idea of what this dream meant. But again, it was a recurring dream that I had at least for a year. But so now we fast forward to Friday, October the 7th, 1983. And I lived in Houston at the time, and I was attending this Greek festival that they had every year in Houston. And I was there with many of my friends. And, this was at one of the big Greek Orthodox churches there near downtown Houston. And this was a very popular and crowded event. And my husband at the time, Michael, planned to join us there at lunch. But sooner than expected, I spotted Michael making his way through the crowds to me. And I thought, well, that's great. He's here early, and I was happy about that. And as I smiled and waved at him, as he got closer, I saw his face, and I knew that something was terribly wrong. I had never seen him look that way before. And when he caught up to me finally, he put his hands on my arms and looked me straight in the eyes. And he said in a trembling voice to me, "Donnie was killed in an accident this morning." And his face crumpled as he spoke the words. So Donnie was my younger brother. And when he told me this, I had this vision of the earth just falling, 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 and shattering at my feet. And I just slumped down to the ground, crying and screaming, no, no, no. And so that day, I understood what my recurring dream was conveying. It was showing me the setting that I was going to be in this crowd, which was the Greek festival at this church. And it showed me my emotional reaction to the news of my brother's death. But prior to that, I had never had any precognitive dreams. But my feelings over this loss, as you can imagine, I was just completely destroyed. My brother and I were very close. I do have a sister, but she's 10 years younger. The grief was just completely unbearable. And I just didn't know that a human being could cry so many tears. It was just impossible. And at the funeral, I just wondered how I could possibly continue living after this. My brother and I had just been so close through the years. We'd always kept in touch by phone. And I was just, as you can imagine, our family was destroyed. But 3 days after my brother's funeral, Donnie came back to me while I was driving. This was in my hometown still. I lived in Houston. I'm from Bryan College Station. And he came back to me while I was driving. And so that Wednesday, I drove my brother's personal truck to my grandparents. He was killed in a company truck. And so here I was driving his personal truck. I was by myself heading toward my grandparents. And I was taking flowers and plants and things to my grandparents from the funeral. And this trip takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Well, halfway there, a strange thing began happening to me as I'm driving. I suddenly developed 360-degree vision. I could see everything around me while I was driving. And I just had no idea what was happening to me. But during this time, I became aware that someone was right at my right shoulder. And then I realized it was my brother. And so when I saw him, he began speaking telepathically to me. Now, remember, I'm still driving along. And I could see Donnie's, I'll say body, but it was made up of this series of light points. And again, he was speaking to me telepathically. And he told me not to be sad, that he was happy. And most of all, he wanted me to know a little bit of what it was like for him now. And he explained to me that he was on another plane of being and that it had simply been time for him to go. So at this point, I became aware that I was no longer in my body, but existed only in a state of consciousness. That's the only way I know how to describe it. And I was no longer aware of driving the truck. And I saw this landscape very briefly, which I could only describe as some outlines of some trees and countryside. But after that, my entire focus was on experiencing the feeling of infinity and eternity. And throughout this entire experience, my brother stayed with me. He was at my right shoulder area. And I felt with no body any longer restricting me, I felt that I was one with the universe. I had this feeling of oneness. And I was totally one with peace and all knowledge in the universe. And in fact, I felt like that I was completely one with all knowledge in the universe. And most of all, though, I was one with this energy of love or spirit that is everything in the universe. That is what I experienced and became. And I understood that we are all one with this energy of love and everything else as well. And I also understood that this spirit, this love, is the all-encompassing, caring, and creative element of the universe. I was experiencing this as this oneness with everything. And I understood, again, as I said, that there's no separation from anything, of anything from this all-encompassing spirit. And all we have to do is really open up our consciousness to that idea and allow that feeling and this consciousness to be present within us and to be one with that. And during this time, I loved being in this state of consciousness only. It was just pure freedom to me. And I didn't care anything at all about going back to my body or my life or anything like that. I just wanted to stay in this moment and this feeling, which to me was like a natural state of being. And I just wanted to experience more of this because it was home to me. And, you know, although I feel certain at that time that my brother communicated some other information to me during this time, I cannot recall all of it. And I now believe that I was not meant to recall it, and that perhaps he shared information with me about future events for my life. That's just a guess on my part. But as I desired to be deeper into this experience, I suddenly began whooshing away. That's the only way I could describe it. Remembering this is kind of out in the middle of the universe. And I began to move very rapidly away from where we were. But within an instant, I felt my brother's energy or spirit. I can only describe it as like him pushing down on me, like where the area of my physical form would be. And so he was pushing down on me, and with a feeling of, I can only describe as feeling like a thud, I landed back into my physical body, which was still driving the truck I was in. And during that whole rest of the day, I felt so at peace and I was so happy because I realized I had been with my brother and had this great experience. But as time went on, I fell back into this very deep grief because, of course, I missed my brother so much. But from this experience I had, my life, my consciousness, my view of life on earth was never the same. And for the rest of my life, I had, you know, other after-death communications and some other strange events. Again, because I feel that my consciousness was totally changed by this experience that I'd had. So these after-death communications and other strange events continued. For example, I saw my brother in my living room one day. When I would come home from work, a lot of times in the dining room, there was this one chair that would be pulled out. I asked my husband, was he going in there and pulling out this chair? And he said no. And that was the chair my brother used to sit in one summer when he stayed with us. And another time I came home and there was this book that it was in the hallway. There was a built-in bookcase there. And you could see where this book had come from. It had come from the very bottom shelf. It had flown across the hallway. And so when I saw that, I went and picked up the book. Well, it was the volume D of an old encyclopedia set. And of course, my brother's name was Don. So, another time I came home and I made my way to our bedroom, and there was a chair placed right in the middle of the doorway. And at first I thought someone was in there, but yet again, it was just something that my brother did. And some of these things actually happened when my husband was around. One time we were in our little TV room in this same house watching TV, and all of a sudden we had a couple of bookcases in there, and all of a sudden this book came flying out across the room and fell right at the feet of my husband and I. So he was a witness to that. It wasn't just me having, dreamed these incidents up. But my mother also had a dream, I'll say a dream encounter with my brother. He came back to her in the form of a deer. But for the rest of my life, sort of like I've had guidance that comes through for me. And at one point, I actually saved my family from dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. It was one Christmas when we stayed at my dad and his wife's house. And we were all getting sick. And in the middle of the night, I crawled down the hallway. I knew there was something wrong, and I knew I needed to get the door open to the front porch, to the front area, to get air in there. I didn't know why, but I know that was my brother guiding me. I mean, literally, if I had not made it down the hall to open that door, we would have died there. So, continuing to have this intuition for the rest of my life like that. I also developed electromagnetic effects. Like, for example, in the evening, if I walk down the street lights go out when I get under them, and then when I walk past, they come back on. Another time, this friend of mine, I saw her develop. I could see her aura, which I'd never seen an aura before, but it just developed, and I saw it. And that person became a healer. And because I had seen this giant purple aura around her develop suddenly. So, I've had a lot of experiences like that along the way in life. Just never know what will come of that, and what may follow on as a result. But in the end, I as time went on, I developed what I like to call the meld into spirit technique, or MIST. And this is something that's done with your eyes open, and you focus on connecting with your heart center. And it's really about being the oneness of spirit, or the universal energy of love. And so on my website, I do provide a video or a recording of that visualization, and it's called the meld into spirit technique. And it doesn't take all that long to do, and it's meant to be done with your eyes open. So I don't know that we have time to go through that visualization. It's not that long, but I just would like to make people aware that they can find that on my website. As I said, there's a lot of additional information on my website that I feel people can use, especially the meld into spirit technique. Like I said, it's meant to be done with your eyes open, and you can do it while you're out walking around. It's kind of a way to help bring in your current life, and what you're seeing and experiencing, kind of bringing that all together into the world of spirit, and experiencing, that oneness, even as you're in, your everyday life. Oh, it doesn't take very long. It's only like 4 little paragraphs. And, so again, this visualization is called the meld into spirit technique, or MIST. And so the instructions go like this. Now, in your mind's eye, imagine and see everything around you blurring and blending together. There are no more edges to anything. Everything is becoming all the same white light particles of light floating and merging. Now imagine the light expanding beyond Earth, further and further out into the entire infinite universe, encompassing all. Everything becomes the light and on out into infinity. As this process continues, feel how easy it is to let go of all judgment, of people, of issues, of life. It all falls away, released easily and completely. When we feel through our heart completely free, then we easily experience being one with the universal consciousness of spirit, of the all that is. Just relax into that supportive, loving feeling. There's no separation of anything. You are safe, you are loved. Left behind are any human earthly worries. We are now completely one with the love, the light, the universal consciousness, as are all things. Feel the freedom. Feel the wholeness, the peace that passes understanding. No separation of anything. This is home, the all that is. All is well, always has been, and always will be in the peace of oneness. So again, that's also provided on my website. And again, it's meant to be done with your eyes open and get into that space of realizing what you're seeing around you is all the oneness, and we are part of that oneness. Thank you for letting me discuss that meditation.
Oh, thank you for leading us through it, Paula. That is absolutely beautiful. That is really
you.
fantastic. And of course, what is so lovely about your experience? What do you call it? Do you call it a spiritually transformative experience, or do you call it an out of body experience, or a shared near death experience? Do you have a term for it?
Well, really, I view it as an out of body experience that led me to experience being the oneness of spirit and everything that is. And that's what I like about it, because so many times it's hard for us to figure out how to reach a state of being where we can let these things go and just assimilate spirit and that oneness. There's so many other things happening in life all the time. But if you have kind of this guided meditation and can let that take over, then you'll be able to really let go of anything that's coming to your mind or whatever. And you're just there in that state of being with oneness.
Well, I'm certainly going to use it with my meditation group. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful, slightly different way of meditating, and
Thank you.
it's beautiful, very, very lovely. Do you have an ongoing connection with your brother? Do you feel his presence, sort of?
Oh yes, yes. Through the rest of my life, I definitely have continued to have outreach from him here and there. That it's not all the time, but again, and in my book I do talk about some of these things that had happened, but like coming home after work and in our dining room finding this one chair that would always be pulled out. Well, that chair, I mean, my brother spent a summer with us. This is when he was in college, close to getting out of college, and And so he was working there in Houston and staying with us. But anyway, he and my husband, John, at that time, they used to get in the dining room and play this crazy electric football game into the night. And so he always sat in this one chair. Well, many times when I would come home after work in the dining room, I would find that chair pulled out. And of course, I would put it back in. And I asked my husband back then, I said, are you going in the dining room and pulling this chair out, sitting there for some reason? He's like, no, I never even go in there. And so, that was one thing that I knew. Plus, there was a time I came home after work and I was just coming out of the bedroom door to go into the living room. And for an instant, I saw my brother in there. He was looking at the stereo cabinet. When he lived with us, he used to play a bunch of records and stuff. And it was just an instant that I saw him. And for example, even now in this office where I'm sitting, my home office right now, across from where I'm sitting are two bookcases. And this is not a large office that I'm in. But one day I was in here, this was probably 6 months ago. I was by myself. There was no one else here in the house. And I was sitting here at the computer like I am right now. As I say, across from me are two bookcases. Well, all of a sudden, this book flies out from the top bookcase in here towards the window. And I jumped about a foot out of my chair because, of course, I wasn't expecting it. But I stood up and I looked at the bookcase and I said, cut it out, Donnie. I know that's you. So, it's like, but see, that's the kind of relationship my brother and I had growing up together. We were always kind of doing stuff against each other or, picking at each other. So, it's not often that things like that happen. It's not like he lives here like some ghost haunting us or anything like that. People ask me about that, but it's nothing like that. It's just sort of this continued interaction that my brother and I have. But again, it's not all the time. It's, really, it's just here and there through the years. But you know what? I know it's him and it's okay. I don't know if other people have those kinds of things. Perhaps they do.
Hi, Paula. I
Hi.
was curious about your brother Donnie and his what you would interpret as his spiritual development at the time of his passing. He seems like he came through quite quickly, and we do hear that some people need to learn how to come through, but it seems like he had the knack pretty quick. So I was just curious about if you knew about what he thought about afterlife or how spiritual he was.
Well, first of all, my brother was very well liked. Everybody loved my brother. He had an expansive personality. He was very funny. Oh my God, he was just so funny. He could keep people, just laughing and so on. So he had already this kind of expansive, I'll say, personality. And, I never knew anything ugly that my brother ever did or said to anybody. He was just this wonderful, big soul who, for him, joy and laughing and helping people, it was kind of all about that. And even his friends, among his friends, he was well thought of and loved by everybody. So I think that just his natural state of being, and of course, again, as I said, my brother and I grew up together. There was only 4 years difference between us. And I mean, one time I almost got him killed because I was always in charge of my brother out in the neighborhood. My mother said, now you take care of your brother. So I always had this big responsibility on me anyway. But we had been out on the street getting some ice cream cones from the ice cream truck, and I wasn't paying attention. I was supposed to be holding his hand as we walked back across the street. And instead of walking behind this snow cone truck where I could see the traffic coming from the left, I took us in front and I wasn't paying any attention to him. And we both stepped out, and this woman, I mean, literally her bumper stopped at my brother's leg. And that's how close we came to being hit. And, you know, it just things like that. I just, this connection I always had with my brother. Both of us went to Baptist church. We went to Vacation Bible School. So we were schooled in all of that and had that background. And my brother had a really good heart. And I consider that a spiritual side of him, because my brother was never a mean person. That's kind of where I was going with explaining how so many people loved him, and he just had a big heart.
Paula, I love your meditation. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe a tough one, but can you describe your sense of time during your experience?
Well, having that out-of-body experience into the middle of the universe, I didn't really have so much a sense of time. It was really all about the oneness. It wasn't so much about time. And you know, I can talk about the oneness and being the oneness and all that, but it's very, very hard to describe how you can even achieve that level of oneness with spirit, because it was just a different kind of experience, obviously, being out of body with my brother. All I can say is it's so much more a feeling of wholeness, and as part of that wholeness of everything, it's just expansive. And it's just hard to describe in being
It sounds
back.
wonderful.
Yeah, well, it is. And, you know, I try to achieve that sense of oneness here on earth, obviously, this being the oneness and letting go of things. But even at that, and I feel like I do achieve a good level of it, but it's still not the same as what I remember having experienced in this out-of-body deal.
Thank you for coming to talk to us, Paula.
Thank you.
When you say you were in the middle of the universe, did it feel like the physical universe or something else? What did you perceive at that time?
What I perceived was it looked as though my brother and I were just hanging in the center of the universe. And what I saw there was just like what you see pictures from, taken in space. The inky blackness, you see all these stars and planets or whatever, the starlight. And it was just that sense of hanging there in being supported, I'll say, by this inky blackness of the universe. But it wasn't, and seeing the stars and things. It wasn't scary at all. But through those moments, there was no sense of the edges of my body. I was just all part of the consciousness of the oneness, just being a total part of that. Yes, I could see that I had my body there and everything, but the feeling that I was experiencing was there weren't any lines around my body or anything. I was just one with the oneness of spirit. It's the only way I can describe it. It just was completely freeing, and I had no sense of fear or anything. It was all about love. I mean, it really is all about the love. That is what the oneness is, and that is what I became, was one with that love. And that is who we are, and that is what spirit is. Obviously, our lives on earth, we have so many other things going on. It's I won't say it's impossible for some people to achieve that state, but I think it's difficult.
Yes, thank you. Paula, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story. It always, the more we hear them, the more it adds to our own experience so much. You said you were driving your car at the time when this experience happened?
Let's see, the out-of-body experience. Yes. Yes.
So you actually kind of went into, I would say, maybe a timeless state, because you couldn't have been gone for long in human time, or you would have crashed your car.
That's exactly right. You're so right about that, because, you know, I was on this little bypass, is what it's called, out of Bryan, driving. And then that was when I left. And then when I came back, I had already just made the turn, not too far down the road, that took me to my grandparents. Well, the time that elapsed for that to happen was not that long.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, what I experienced seemed like a lot longer than that time that I was driving.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much.